All right. Good afternoon, Facebook.
What's up?
So today we had a request last week to talk about getting hijacked by hyperpalatable foods. And we talk a lot about the natural human diet, not only naturally attainable quantities, but like what we could get in nature and how we're perfectly suited for that. But so we live in, if we lived in that world, it would be easy. So Josh, let's start with you, because you had a hyper diet of hyperpalatability for a long time, longer and more intensely than most.
Yeah, my buddy used to have a say at the deer camp when he would break open the first beer, he'd pop open the top, and he'd say, "My mama didn't give milk this good," or something like that, right? Something goofy. But the thing is the system that makes us driven towards certain foods that seem good to us, like mama's milk, for instance, right? Such a beautiful design to keep us as animals from starving to death is essentially what we're doing, right? The casomorphines in the milk make us sort of addicted to our mama's milk. We wind up being addicted to a cow's mama's milk too later on in life because we've implemented that practice socially. But my point is, we have this circuitry that drives us sort of universally as a species towards caloric density and palatability, right? And making bells and whistles go off in the brain. And a big, powerful thing for me to understand. And so, okay, to back it up, the whole point is, in that whole world back then, all of that food was like mama's milk. It wasn't just the palatability. It was made with love. It was from mama, right? It was Mama's 7-layer cake. It was her Swiss steak. It was her liver and onions and mashed potatoes, her special cream potatoes. All of that is essentially like mother's milk, and we are addicted to it in the same way. And what's a shame is that very natural system, that very natural process is being exploited. It's totally being exploited. And it's not some conspiracy or anything like that. It's just a matter of fact. It's just what we got before us today. And the more that we can understand it, the more I think we can pragmatically make decisions around it.
Yeah, and I think it's so empowering to recognize that all this circuitry is inside us for a reason.
Sure.
That evolution tends towards antifragility.
Yes.
So that if you had a species where it was kind of hit or miss, like you think, you show someone like, oh, some people love Brussels sprouts, some people hate Brussels sprouts, some people think cilantro is delicious, some people think cilantro tastes like soap. Like, imagine if that was mother's milk. Like,
yeah,
like a third or a half or a 10% of the infants just were like, nah, right? Maybe that's the way it was, like a gazillion years ago,
right?
And those babies didn't survive and reproduce,
right?
So it almost didn't matter. It was a crapshoot whether like casomorphins are like yummy and addictive or gross and off-putting, because like all nature has to do is roll the dice, and whoever resonates with that dice roll ends up surviving. So it was inevitable,
right,
that mother's milk was going to be incredibly appealing, reliably addictive for our species. And so that anti-fragility all of a sudden in a new environment all of a sudden becomes a tremendous deficit.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to read something. So have I told you, Russ, that I'm reading this book, Atomic Habits?
Yes.
Yeah. So I heard James Clear, the author, on the Rich Roll podcast, and it was just brilliant discussion. Sometimes it really bugs me when Rich grabs these guests before I have a chance.
Oh, wait till I tell you the latest.
But so he's talking about so animals in nature. So I'm just going to read you like a couple of paragraphs. The gray-lag goose is a ground nesting bird. Occasionally, as the mother moves around in the nest, one of the eggs will roll out and settle on the grass nearby. Whenever this happens, the goose will waddle over to the egg and use its beak and neck to pull it back into the nest. So there you have, just us liking mother's milk, right? Yeah. You have a very, very appropriate, practical, evolutionary impulse. Tinbergen, the scientist, discovered that the goose will pull any nearby round object, such as a billiard ball or a light bulb, back into the nest. The bigger the object, the greater their response. One goose even made a tremendous effort to roll a volleyball back and sit on top. The gray-lag goose is following an instinctive rule. When I see a round object nearby, I must roll it back into the nest. The bigger the round object, the harder I should try to get it. So James Clear says it's like the brain of each animal is preloaded with rules for behavior.
Right. And these practical things, right.
Right. And when it comes across an exaggerated version of that rule, it lights up like a Christmas tree. So he calls this a supernormal stimulus, a heightened version of reality. And that's exactly what we're eating. That's exactly what is offered to us 24/7.
Right. We're sitting on volleyballs.
Right. Or beach balls.
I think it's an egg.
Yeah, and you know what? Our eggs hatch, right? Because we eat the food and we go, oh my God, this is better than mama's milk.
Yeah.
Right. The casomorphines kind of, chill us out a little bit, but alcohol from the distillation of grain,
right,
is like taking that to this whole new level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My mama didn't make milk this good.
Right. And Mother Nature never made dinner this good.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Right. But now who could possibly be so heartless as to deprive yourself or your loved ones or your kids of this bounty?
Exactly.
So what do? You went from hyper palatable to something else. Have you extinguished the circuitry? Do you fight against it every day?
No, I mean, I totally concede. I surrender. I give up needing to replace that palatability in a 1-to-1 ratio. I understand the power of what this hyper palatable, very lucrative to sell food is doing to the people that I love and was doing to myself and has done to the people that I've sent off in wooden boxes over the years. Right. And so it just grew into something bigger, a bigger consciousness about food, where I can simultaneously agree that creamed potatoes with whole butter and cream and salt and pepper and some roasted garlic and a crispy ribeye is a great, perfect bite of food to have with a Pinot Noir. I understand that. I get it. Done it. It might still make my mouth water, but it's bigger than that to me now. That's how, but that's a practice. That's something that happens over time. That's something that requires community, which I've had a self-selected community over the years on the internet, which is useful. And so it's not a one real snap finger answer other than, it's a process where it's a growing process. It's an orientation towards growth that ultimately can get you to a different norm. But step one is just recognizing it and seeing it for what it is.
So in other words, if someone told the goose, those are not your eggs. In fact, you're neglecting your eggs.
You're neglecting your eggs because you think this big fucking volleyball is an egg. Because in your mind, ooh, bigger and whiter and rounder is better. That's palatability. But in the same time, the egg that Mother Nature wanted you to incubate is dying. And that's our health, I think. Mother Nature gave us our health as a default to incubate, except in very rare instances. Generally speaking, as a default, we were given health. And we have done all sorts of things along the way that our very natural processes and mechanisms in our brains have excited us or prompted us to do, that have moved us further and further away from that default, right? So it's a matter of that system being hijacked, like you said, and pulling us away, pulling us towards the volleyball instead of the egg that really needs us, and where happiness is, where evolution wants us to be, where nature really exists, that beautiful cascade of random things that turns into a biological creature over millions of years. How crazy and amazing is that? We're one of those, and we can participate in that process or think we got it figured out and do it on our own. And that's a surrender process to be able to think about it in those terms, I think.
Yeah. And then, so the first day that you decided to roll the real egg rather than the volleyball, you had to tell yourself, like, this isn't going to be as rewarding. This isn't as satisfying.
Right.
So when I think about like your story about after running the Crescent City Classic and then going out, I can't remember the name of the restaurant, to get your roast beef Poboys and
down the hatch. Hey, I gotta shout out my boy Renee though. Renee, who owns Down the Hatch, he reposted my post this morning about Dr. Clapper with the carbs aren't making you fat thing. So the dude himself that owns Down the Hatch reposted that video this morning, and I have to shout out Renee. Good job, buddy. I'll see you seeing.
Awesome.
He's still probably going to roast a pig this spring or whenever they do it. Wow.
All right. But you have to be prepared and not get disappointed at your disappointment, because there is, like, just biologically, like, dopamine is this chemical. It's much more complex than this, but basically dopamine at first is what we have when we get pleasure. Like you eat the cookie and you go, oh my God, this is amazing. You get this giant spike of dopamine. And then the next time it happens, you see the cookie and you get the spike of dopamine prior to eating, right? Because dopamine is actually about motivation. It's about getting you to act. So then you see the cookie, and then you eat it, and you don't have the dopamine. It's steady state. But if you get a hit of dopamine, you eat the cookie, and it turns out not to be a cookie. It turns out to be a baked potato. There's a gap between your expectation and your reward, and you actually get a downward.
Right.
You're like demotivated. You're like, oh my God. You have to be able to anticipate that and to interpret it positively, as opposed to the way nature wants you to.
Yes, interpret it positively, not as, but I like donuts and I don't want it. What do you do about cravings? I just can't. No, you waiting for things to stop tasting good. That day's not coming. That day's not coming.
Right, because the closer you get to that, the closer you get to fake foods.
Right, exactly.
Right. So if you need to
go down another wrong path, right.
Right. If you need to transition for identity purposes, to say, okay, I'm a plant-based eater now. Remember, we're talking about whole food, plant-based. Right. And those can be two very different paths. And so, we're not saying, okay, we'll go, you go both of those instantaneously. We're not saying go from beach balls to eggs. We're not saying change everything to be perfect right away. So whichever path you take, understand that they have to converge if your goal is health.
Right. And just because it's bigger and rounder and wider doesn't mean that it's better, like in the ball scenario. Just because it's more hyper palatable and you get more bells and whistles and shits and giggles when you take a bite of it, doesn't mean it's really better.
Right. And that's why I see so many people who set up these sort of conditional rules, or they think about having a cheat day, or, well, on Thanksgiving and Christmas, I'll do this. And if that works for you on a psychological level, that's cool. But for so many people, they think they're sort of treating themselves, and it's actually the worst form of torture, because you're resetting back. It's like Sisyphus dropping that boulder and having it roll down the back of the mountain, and you have to pull it back up every single time you reset to a volleyball.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first times I heard your story was on, I think it was the first Rich Roll podcast, and you talked about me and Poboys broke up.
Yes, exactly. We split draws. That's the way. That's how we say it down here. But yeah, we split draws. Means we don't talk anymore. We're not friends. Haven't had it since, and it doesn't mean that I couldn't have had the same success along the way, but it's just easier to conceptualize for me. Like, I'm pissed off. It's easier for me to live that and take that attitude towards things than to go, oh God, no, I just can't. I can't have a po' boy because I don't want to get fat again. No, I'm angry at fuck a po' boy. I'm angry at po' boys,
So there's a comment from Patricia. It says, I feel so much better off sugar and processed foods, and I still struggle with resisting an occasional cookie or bagel, which becomes more and more. And before I know it, ... So I think that's what we're talking about, right? That some people, like, we don't know. For some people, that kind of moderation, like, yeah, I'm not obsessed about it. I'll have a cookie on a birthday. That's okay. If that works for you, then you should do it. Do your N of 1 experimentation. There are some people who think, like, never is a long time, and I'm cool with this. Like, I don't have this kind of dysfunctional relationship where I once I have it, I can't stop thinking about it, and I keep having more and more. But as Patricia says, if that's you, and the sooner you have an occasional one, and it turns into a problem, then know that you're resetting.
Yeah.
Your taste buds every single time you do that.
You might have to abstain, and you get to abstain. It's so frustrating for me to hear people talk about foods that just really control them, and I can't really seem to get it. No.
Uh-oh. Patricia used the W word.
Yeah, no, it's just that's the issue. We deal in wishes and dreams and hopes instead of what you actually have in your hand, which is your own efficacy and locus of control. Until we're willing to recognize that we do have that and not disbody ourselves from our actions, then we're kind of pissing in the wind with any talk of wanting to do something different, because it's not my fault. Before you know it, well, no, you're making decisions, and either we're going to own them and move towards them or not. It's not about whether we wish good enough or hope good enough or pray hard enough. It's about us being conscious in every single moment. Doesn't mean we win every single moment, but it's about being conscious in every single moment. And regardless of the step, make sure the next step is reoriented towards growth, towards better, towards progress, towards
Right. So I would say, Patricia, make a rule and make that rule a serious rule. Like, if you, it sounds like you said, I feel better off sugar and processed food. So let's say cookies and bagels or anything like that. Mm-hmm. As soon as you have one, it becomes a snowball effect. So if you made a rule, like, I don't touch that stuff anymore, whatever the rule is, and then this is like a bright line. So at that point, when you see the bagel or the cookie, you're no longer thinking, well, can I have this one today? Should I have it? It looks so good. Oh, it's from Levain's in Upper West Side. It's amazing. You just say, oh no, I've already decided. And then you listen for all the voices that are going to try to talk you out of it. And they're going to say, yeah, but this is special, or, you can just have a single bite, or, you don't want to appear to be like you're not having fun because you're trying to represent this healthy lifestyle. And if people see you not have a cookie, they're going to be all judgy, and then you won't be a good role model, right? The voice, once you've made that rule, the voice is going to go nuts trying to explain to you why it's a terrible idea to make this rule.
Yeah.
And the trick is to just notice all of the arguments. At first, you can argue with them, right? Because they're not very good. They're certainly not as good as I feel better when I don't eat this shit. Right? That's a mic drop. Right? But the voice is going to keep going on. It doesn't recognize logic.
Yeah.
And so the win is not sort of wishing that you had the willpower, but not having a plan. The win is you make a rule. You say, I don't do this anymore. I am not the sort of person who does it. And you know that the cravings are going to come up because they're volleyballs. And we're programmed to roll volleyballs into our nest. And we accept that the cravings are going to be there and they're going to be strong. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. And it doesn't mean we're weak because we have the cravings. In fact, the cravings, when we ignore them, when we don't obey them, show how strong we are, right? If you're in the gym and you're doing bicep curls with 2 kilogram dumbbells, the 2 kilogram dumbbells that you can lift easily doesn't show how strong you are. If you're doing 30-pound, kettlebells and you're doing bicep curls, that shows your strength. The bigger the craving, the stronger you have to be and you get to be to resist it.
Yeah. And I would encourage you to look beyond finding something that works for you. Because as long as we're looking externally for a thing that's going to finally work for me, you're looking in the wrong spot. This is a process. This is a practice. This is something that you're going to do on purpose with purpose, right? So it's not that it hasn't worked for you or it doesn't work for you. It's you. What are you willing to work for? Let's take a definite step and move in a definite direction instead of like just being all over the place with wishes and hopes and trying to find something that theoretically is going to give me the magic pill. Well, this finally worked for me. No, it's about you understanding some simple things that we kind of already know. Move and eat a lot more plants. We've been told that our entire life. And it's about finally surrendering to those truths that we have known for a long time. And yes, there is some nuanced understanding and some other things that come along in that learning process. But I would save the wishing and hoping for world peace and go to work on creating some changes.
Yeah. And so Patricia has 2 more questions. Says, a rule as if it's drug, alcohol. Yes. And a rule as if it's, I don't rob banks or I don't push little old ladies in front of traffic, right? It's not just a rule about a food. It's about a rule about an identity, right? And about, whether Whole30. So we recommend eat as many plants as possible, eat more plants. So ideally the plants crowd out, red meat, processed food,
and works for you works for me is a relative term. So wherever you are in your continuum right now, if you're getting positive movement and you're moving in a positive direction and your numbers, your biometrics, there's no real reason to make a shift or a change up, then that's fine. That works for you. That's fine. But if we get to a point to where things slow down and it's a mystery and my blood sugars are going up and I can't seem to lose weight, then we know that it's time to make an objective decision about our protocol.
All right. Well, we're past 20 minutes. I want to thank everybody for showing up. If you have topics or questions, this topic was suggested last week by Sue Green Boyle. So thank you very much for making it much easier for us if you just ask us questions. So if you have questions for next week, you can just post them in the comments here, and we'll see you all again later.
All right. Peace, guys.
Bye.